I was asked to speak tonight about the Crusades and about Al-Andalus, and that means that really the subject of the evening is particularly the manipulation of the historical record to suit a modern political agenda, to serve a modern political agenda. And the way that has been done in connection with the Crusades and the record of Muslim Spain is an extraordinarily illuminating and instructive lesson in the tactics of the Islamic jihadists today. As I hope we are all well aware, those tactics are by no means limited to terrorism or to violent attacks, but there is a multi-pronged front that is designed to erode our cultural confidence and to confuse people to the extent that they are unable or unwilling to fight back against the cultural and societal challenge that the Islamic Jihad represents. Now, this is a tactic of warfare that has been noted, of course, for a very long time, and is the subject, for example, of George Orwell's monumental study of totalitarianism, 1984, and yet it doesn't seem to have registered with virtually any Western analysts of the jihad as to exactly how this is being done today, and to what extent, and in such a thoroughgoing manner, it is being done. The Crusades, of course, are the cause of all our troubles. Bill Clinton told us this right after September 11th, 2001. And you know he's an unimpeachable source. Bill Clinton said that the Crusaders, rapacious proto-imperialists, swept out of Western Europe, unprovoked, unannounced, and descended upon the Middle East, sowing destruction, savagery, bloodshed, wherever they went. And this has led, he said, to distrust that has lingered between the West and the Islamic world, and which he was actually saying manifested itself in the attack on September 11th. In other words, the September 11th attack, as far as Mr. Clinton was concerned, was all the Crusaders' fault. And this is a very common theme. It is not only Clinton who has said this, not by any means. The idea is very deeply ingrained. There's a book, The Crusades Through Arab Eyes, by Amin Maalouf, which is very illuminating. And the scholar himself who put it together, Mr. Maalouf, says the same thing. That there was essentially peace and harmony between the Western world and the Islamic world until the Crusaders gave into the barbarism, savagery, and imperialism that we all know is intrinsic in the Western character, and invaded the Middle East. Now, of course, there are several problems with this. The first problem is that it isn't true. The first crusade was called in 1095. I'll return to this, but the first crusade was called in the year 1095. And the Crusaders arrived in Jerusalem in 1099. Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, died in 632. And by 642, his armies had invaded and conquered Syria, Palestine, and Egypt, and continued going and conquered in rapid succession North Africa, up through Spain, into France, as well as besieging Constantinople by 711, and sweeping over Persia and into India. All by the 8th century, all within 100 years of Muhammad's death. They had carried out a record of conquest unparalleled in human history. And it was all done for religious reasons that were delineated by the same Prophet of Islam in the holy book that he left for the Muslims and in traditions that recorded his words and deeds, which are considered normative for Muslims. So, all that was hundreds of years before there was ever any crusade. And yet, we are to believe that all the hostility between the West and the Islamic world comes from the Crusades. Obviously, the point of this, there are several goals designed to be put forth in this, by means of this historical myth, to blunt the impact of the violence committed in the name of Islam that we see today. Because after all, Christianity and Christians are just as bad, and look what they did. And to disarm resistance to Islamization, resistance to the Islamization of Europe, resistance to Islamization anywhere, by sapping our own cultural self-confidence and peddling a moral equivalence that would make us believe, and has made many people believe, including Mr. Clinton, but not limited to him, that there's really no point in resisting this, because after all, nobody's hands are clean. We all have a spotted historical record, and nobody can say their culture is superior to any others, or that a culture is worth defending against a massive, full-scale cultural invasion. That would be improper. It would not only racist, but it would be improper in terms of this historical myth. Because why would there be a need to resist when we have acted the same way? And what's more, and this is where Al-Andalus comes in, why would there be a need to resist when, under Islamic rule in the past, everything was so wonderful? And so that's where we get to Muslim Spain. And this is the product of primarily a scholar named Maria Rosa Menocal in her book, The Ornament of the World, but it is, here again, by no means limited to her work. We are told that in Spain, in the Middle Ages, after the Muslim conquest of the 7th century and the 8th century, there was a proto-multiculturalist paradise in which Jews and Christians and Muslims lived together in harmony, and there was a flowering of science, of intellectual endeavor, and of artistic achievement. And here again, it's a wonderful story, but it's false, and it's deliberately, manipulatively false in order to proffer various political ends. It is to suggest, in other words, several things. That Islamic terror is an epiphenomenon. That violence committed in the name of Islam is something that we need not be concerned about, because for the most part, Muslims have not behaved this way. They've really been just wonderful. And to suggest that there is a large mainstream, authoritative, and ultimately dominant tradition within Islam that is tolerant, pluralistic, and ultimately fundamentally benign, such that, and this is the subtext, should it happen that a Muslim Spain were revived, or a Muslim France created, or an Islamic Republic of the Netherlands, or what have you, then we need not be concerned about that, because it will be a wonderful, benign, multiculturalist paradise, just like Spain. And so the goals of this are clear. Now, it is worth knowing, time doesn't permit many details, but it's worth knowing the reality of the record in regard to both. In the first place, when we talk about the Crusades and jihad, they are not equivalent. They're very often used as equivalents, and there have been many times. As a matter of fact, I've had to fight with editors in America. I have 2 weekly columns, one in Human Events, which is a newspaper. It was Ronald Reagan's favorite newspaper, if any of you are admirers of Mr. Reagan as I am, and Front Page Magazine online. And several times, editors have taken what I have written and changed it to refer to an Islamic crusade. Now, that is offensive on a number of levels. For one thing, the Muslims about whom I am writing would find it most offensive, because a crusade, the word itself, is derived from a cross, and as you may know, in the end times, in Islamic eschatology, the end of the world, Jesus will return. Jesus, the prophet of Islam,